thank you all for coming along, and thank you all for submitting your questions, and for those of you that are engaging with the Women Together group, we really appreciate your feedback and input, and it's that we put forward to Julia and Simon and the executive team. Hello to the regions who are joining us and anyone who's watching at their desks. Thank you too for your contributions. As per the last session, there's an opportunity for you to add questions or to like questions that have already been submitted on Slido. I think that's how you say it, slido.com. And the number is B736. So please log in, and the questions that get to the top, we'll make sure that they get covered off today. And to hand over to Ros Wynne-Jones, who is columnist on The Mirror, and Julia Warren, if you haven't come across her before, is our HR director, right title, who is very kindly agreed to answer all of those questions that we've put since International Women's Day and our first session at the beginning of March. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. I'm going to try and keep pace with all the questions which typically of journalists have all come through in the last minute, about 30 seconds before we kick off. I was going to start by saying thank you to all the men here who've recognised this is an issue for everyone, not just for women. That's Lloyd. Basically, thank you for coming, Lloyd. And also to say thank you to Julia for coming here today. And as some of the questions are about what can we do to kind of talk more about women's achievements in the company, we'll just talk a bit about Julia to start off with. My journalistic digging has discovered that she joined the graduate programme at the John Lewis Partnership in 1982.
I did.
And was asked to run staff management by the age of 23, but told to keep her age a secret. Yes. So that was one interesting fact. She did 12 years at John Lewis, then was the head of HR at Hay Group Management Consultants, then at Thomson Reuters, then was the HR director at Serco, which we were just discussing. I may have written one or two articles about at that time. And she was originally a biologist, studying social biology and food science at London University. She's a member of the 5% Club, which is about increasing the number of apprentices, is that right, in companies. Now, we all know, probably, people in this room, that women in the UK work for free 2 months a year due to the gender pay gap. It's 50 years since the Ford Machinists strike in Dagenham, just up the road, and yet women are being paid on average 15% less, which is also the figure for our own company, or the most sort of recent figures that I've seen, 15%. And if you look at the mean, it's about 80. If you look at the median gap, it's 15. Is that right?
And the mean is 15.
And
the
average
is 18.
And the average is 18.
Yeah.
And the discrepancy in bonuses was about 11% in MGN, which is the bit of the company lots of us work in.
3.5% overall. Yeah, it's a much smaller gap on bonus.
And then adding in the Express and Star, we kind of feel may not help. I don't know. Maybe it will. Do you think it's
they were
any
marginally better than us.
Oh,
They
really?
were like by about 1 point.
Okay.
But I don't think overall it's not going to make a difference, and it's probably worth it. I'm not very good. I'm not sure how useful averages are in this situation, but 18% is just about the UK average for gender pay gap. And interestingly, the UK government are saying that it is the lowest gender pay gap of recent years. Now, I find that a bit odd because I'm not sure anyone's ever calculated it before. So I'm not quite sure around that, but certainly that's what they would be quoting. So we're around average, and I suppose that means better than most and worse than some. So I think it's roughly where we are.
So we've had a whole range of kind of questions in. Some of them are about, we've had things about maternity cover, we've got stuff about unconscious bias, there's lots of things to kind of come through. I guess we would start off by just very simply saying, you know, what is the gender pay gap, how's it different from equal pay, and what are we doing to address it in the company?
Okay. So gender pay gap, I think everyone knows, was introduced last year by the government. It's a calculation which essentially looks, it was really fun, I was trying to find a nice definition, because I do think this is probably one of the biggest areas of confusion that there is, because people immediately think that gender pay gap means at an individual level, women are paid less than men for doing the same job, and that is not the case. That was made illegal, so to your point around the strike 50 years ago, 45 years ago, it was made illegal to pay a woman less for doing the same job as the male counterpart. So it's not that. What it is, and I think a number of people have argued in terms of how useful the gender pay gap calculation is. I personally think it is useful because even though it's a bit of a clunky number, and it's worked out in terms of basically it looks at average hourly rates, and it compares men and women across the whole organisation. Now what that means you're going to get is when you have an organisation, any organisation where there is more men than women in more senior roles, which is the situation we have, is immediately that is going to be one of the things that generates the gap, which I can confidently say is one of the situations we're facing here. So we've got, I've got every level by every whatever now in terms of getting the detail around it, but essentially speaking, for the top 4/5 levels of our organisation, there are more men than women, and that is going to be one of the things that determines that gap. The reason I think it's quite useful, in the sense, even though it's a bit of a blunt instrument, in the sense there's lots of things that might, I think, that we can usefully look at within that. The fact is, all organisations have got the same clunky number, and actually that in itself is quite useful because it does give you a point of comparison. And the other thing that I think we all know that's really important is that the fact it's published and the fact it's out there means that it gets attention, and I think those things are very important. And as I say, I think that that's very positive for everybody concerned.
So of course, as a newspaper like The Mirror, we're constantly trying to tell other people to get their house in order, and telling them, writing about their terrible gender pay gaps. So for us, it seems, particularly important if, the same as when we lecture people about the living wage, for example, it would be great if The Mirror became a living wage employer. That would be another thing that could boost people sort of from the bottom.
We are.
Including our cleaners.
Including our cleaners. I think if they're employed by us, anybody that is employed by us is on the living wage. What I don't know, if you're making the point, if they are contract cleaners, whether they're on living wage, I don't know, and we wouldn't have access to that. I don't have access to that information at the moment, but everybody, we are a living wage company, so we do pay living wage.
Because I think if you get the accreditation, to get the proper accreditation as a living wage employee, you have to include your contractors.
Yeah, and I'm
so
not
maybe
sure,
that's
to be
something
fair.
we could...
I can certainly look at that, but I mean, as I said, that's not going to impact gender pay in that sense, but no. I can certainly have a look at that.
That'd be interesting. So there's a question at the bottom there saying, has anything been done to address unconscious bias since Women Together launched? I've had a few questions from people who are saying, we did a survey sort of back in March. There were some results. When are we going to see the results, and what's being done sort of since then?
So there's a couple of things I'd say. So the survey is the Women's Network survey, not necessarily something that I own in terms of doing that. What I do own on behalf of the business is obviously making sure the sort of actions that we're taking in terms of doing that. And certainly I know that the unconscious bias training was something that was very much on there. I'll come back to that. I'm not avoiding it. In terms of what I would say is that what I have been doing since I joined, interestingly, before even the publication of the gender pay, was trying to get under the cover of understanding us as an organisation. And by that, one of the very first things that I've done has introduced a framework so as we understand the level of jobs and how different roles sit within the organisation. And that's really important in terms of doing a number of things, which allows us to be comfortable around and understand where jobs sit, and making sure people are have a clear understanding of the jobs they're doing. We can also link pay ranges to that. I can equally look at talent within those organisations, within each area of our business and across our business, and that gives me a greater insight. The other thing that I've been doing that I think is really, really important groundwork before we come on, in a sense, probably addressing some of the things here, is I've done a huge amount of analysis of my team in terms of seeing what the patterns we're seeing in terms of recruiting people as it stands at the minute, and where we're losing people. And what I can see at the moment is that, interestingly, I think that, and since the beginning of this year, we've had a policy which is, as far as possible, there should be, if there is a slate for individuals coming in externally, we've got an equal balance. interestingly, we're recruiting at the more junior levels of our organisation. So we've got, roughly speaking, we've got 7 levels. Between 7 and 5, we're actually recruiting. There are more women than men in those areas, and we are recruiting more women than men. It would be fair to say one of the things I'm concerned about at the minute, and I'm being quite open and honest about this, is interesting, we're losing more women through probation at the minute than men. Now, I'm slightly concerned that, interestingly, we've skewed the recruitment almost, dare I say it, slightly too much in terms of just getting a woman in, do you know what I mean, and actually making sure we get the right people in. So we're actually looking at that recruitment at the minute.
But might there not be a slightly different problem though, which is when young women come in, they don't necessarily have the confidence to make that high impact in their early weeks that a very confident man might?
Well, possibly. I think that, interestingly, in those environments though, women are in for the most part in the majority. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's probably, again, I can't rule out what you're saying. And again, what I am being very honest about, I just simply don't know why that is. You could be right. It could be a confidence thing. I think we need to find out around what's happening there. More problematic for me, and I think organisationally, and I think is fundamental to us actually changing the gender pay gap. I think most organisations can absolutely focus on the top levels of women getting more senior jobs, and of course that's important, but we'll go on to why it's problematic with us at the minute. But for me, one of the really, really important things is we are losing women at the midpoints of their career, sort of halfway through. Now, bluntly speaking, women making the decision to be full-time mums or part-time mums and part-time working is a very, very legitimate career choice. And I think that we need to support them in doing that, and I feel, it's very comfortable around that. What I need to make sure of, and I can't be sure of at the minute, is what are we doing that maybe is impacting those decisions. On the face of it, we've got 88% of people going on maternity leave return in some form. So we're only losing 12% of women at that point, which actually against a lot of other organisations is actually quite positive, but it's still 12%. And interestingly, also, what we are also seeing is obviously more women are coming back part-time at that point, and again, making sure that, as I say, we've got that right thing. So that's the bit I'm trying to uncover at the moment.
And are there things being done to encourage men to take more paternity leave or become so that feels more equal?
One of the things.
Do you know how many men took paternity leave?
No, I don't off the top of my head. I can find that number out. One of the things that I think is really funny about us as an organisation is we do some great things, and most of the policies and things there are really good shape. We're just pretty rubbish, or have been pretty rubbish at getting them out there. I love Buzz in the sense that I think it is a really, really nice medium that I think people are going to a lot more now, and I think that does give us a great opportunity to do that. I think that all of our policies are at least at least competitive in most instances. I think are probably jolly competitive or more than competitive in terms of doing that. But I think you're right in terms of, I do think that, and certainly this year we have an agenda of comms that we've worked through with Marcus and Simon to make sure that we can emphasise some of that. And I noticed there was a nice question there around where are those policies, and are they hidden? It's really interesting. They're all on the, if you press the HR button, which is logoed, they're all held within there. The reason they wanted them held there was if you ever have to update them, they're in one place, but they are there and they should be visible. If anyone struggles with that or has any better ideas, then please do let me know, because, as I said, they are all there. And
could email them to everyone, maybe.
Yeah.
Just as a
email's not popular in this place in terms of shooting everything out to everybody, and I think that certainly I know that so we're sitting there as well, but obviously Matt and Simon are trying to drive the traffic into Buzz at the minute, but certainly I think probably what I would say is anyone's concerned about it, they can certainly phone my HR and the HR services, and then we can take it from there.
So one of the issues that's being raised up there about CVs, could they be delivered to people recruiting blind? To me, slightly misses the point, because where the gender pay gap is worse is the fact that because we're a sort of heritage industry that's maybe declining, let's not say the D word,
Yeah.
a lot of the hiring goes on internally. So obviously
Yeah.
you've got a lot of men going for a lot of jobs and
So,
through
yeah.
the different levels. And at that point, obviously we do want to retain staff and keep them, but what can we do to
So,
address that issue?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I wanted to be sure today in terms of just being, those of you that know me, I'm probably straight talking, and so therefore, you know, I'm conscious that I want this to come across positively, but there is also a reality check that we all need to have here. And actually, we were looking at this, and I think we've still got some more research to do. But I don't want to use the D word, but actually the number of employees year on year is reducing, let's say that. And what...
Sorry, that was a more tactful.
Yeah, is reducing. And one of the things legally we're under the obligation, but it absolutely plays to the point that you're making, is that therefore, when we get sizable roles coming out, they are typically rising from a restructuring. And when you are restructuring an organisation, individuals have rights in terms of being considered for roles that are going, you know, when you're crushing two jobs together or something like that, you are going to have a population that are entitled to be considered and have to be consulted with. Now, one of the downsides of that is, as you can see, is if you have an all-male population at that particular point, effectively saying you potentially are perpetuating the issue, because the people that you have to consider legally are men, and the sizable roles that are coming out as a result of reduction. And so therefore, and one of the reasons, again, you know, I know that we're going to probably come across the great Q word in terms of, are we going to have quotas here? I've looked at a number of our competitors and what they've put out in quotas, and bluntly speaking, they can't possibly achieve them. And I think they are, I don't like to say lying, I just think that they've put numbers out there because they look sensible, and actually they'll, with the view that people are going to forget them in a few years' time in terms of what that looks like.
I mean, would it be worth asking them how they think they're going to do it?
Well, we've done some of that. I mean, certainly Simon and I have discussed, and you know, again, I think I'm just conscious I didn't finish the question on the unconscious bias, and I will do. Simon and I have been doing some analysis, because what we're very, very clear about, which is his style and my style, is we want to come out with some ambitious actions, but we want them to be realistic. And actually part of the realism for us as an organisation is accepting that, you know, in a year's time, there is a very, very strong chance we will have even fewer people, and that what you're going to get in that situation is you're always going to get a slightly shrinking of your triangle, and actually making sure that you know, we are realistic around what we can achieve in that time. Because I think I would be doing us all a disservice if I came out with something that it seemed unlikely we could achieve. So, for example, if we look at print, in terms of the amount of people in our print organisation, at the risk of not using the D word, there is probably, you know, we would absolutely know that is a very challenging environment in terms of physically printing. You will know that in our organisation they have very, very few women in that area. Are they going to probably be recruiting really any of the medium or senior jobs in that environment within the next year or so? The chances are no. And therefore, me coming out with a target for print, it would almost be like saying, are we going to train someone, are we going to be looking to train women to go down the mines? Do you sort of mean, when actually we're not, that's not going to
But
probably
is
be
that
sensible.
something we could challenge, and so maybe we do have to start recruiting at that level? And obviously digital's growing, we're recruiting there.
So digital's great. I mean, I think where we have to do more, so if you look at where, and again, you know, we've been talking around various initiatives around it. Some of the marketplace done some great stuff around women in engineering, women in technology, women in digital, and the rest of it. It has to be a fantastic opportunity for us, and has to be clearly one of the areas where we probably are like to be recruiting. And I think on those sort of side of things, we absolutely can have a very strong focus. I think my point around realism is we should probably put, all I'm saying is, if we've all of us got sort of an energy and focus and time, actually it seems much more sensible to be focusing in there and trying to take every opportunity of the roles we get there.
But yet,
than
even in
looking
print, we can probably all think of examples where there seem to be lots of good people for a job, but it went to the same old bloke, but it always kind of goes to...
I mean printing.
Oh, printing, sorry. I mean,
sorry,
I was
printing.
talking about print as opposed
Printing. Sorry,
the
I ought to be
digital
really
part
clear.
of the
No,
paper, which
sorry. No, that. Thank you for that. Look, no, printing in
Yes.
terms of.
Oh, sorry,
so,
okay,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I think that's the
There's
point
not
about
many
being
ladies
realistic.
in
No,
printing.
no. And in fact, poor old, I know Mr. Bruce, who has been working with us, says that for him, actually getting diversity would almost be is of any sort in that environment is very tough.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'll go back. Sorry, I should have answered my question around doing the unconscious bias training.
Yes.
What we're looking to do at the minute is, I know that in the past, and Zoe has helped me with this in terms of we've done some awareness training that had not gone down well, didn't hit the buttons. We're looking to do a combination.
Why did it not go down well?
Well, I
Because
think
people didn't realise that they had unconscious bias.
Well, no, I
Because
think it was just
unconscious
awareness.
in
I
some
think
way.
it was awareness as opposed to actually doing something about it. You're probably absolutely right. And actually, I think there's probably something much more around training. And what we're trying to do at the minute is, in order to get something out more rigorously, is looking at both something. I know it probably sounds silly to say doing something online, but there is some stuff you can do online. But then also, at what point do we bring groups together? And that's on our agenda at the minute.
And will that cover wider diversity? I'm sort of looking around the room and seeing that although it's a room full of
Yes.
women, it's also not very diverse in
No.
other ways.
And again, Simon's statement, his inclusion, diversity and inclusion statement is, very much. We've got a lot of considerations that we have to do. I think one reason why it's, dare I say it, one reason it shouldn't be this. One reason you often start with women is that it's one of the things that you have absolute numbers on. The rest of the things we are relying on people to give us data that they don't have to give us. And so therefore getting an accurate picture, although I think we're pretty clear what that picture might be,
could
but
just
getting,
walk around the newsroom.
but yeah, I know, and just sort of do 5-bar gates. But actually, we know that we want that to be, the whole diversity thing to be much broader than that. And I'm encouraged because I think that we've now got some people thinking through coming up with their own groups like this.
Yeah, but Jane, I think it's Wednesday.
Yeah.
You've got your, is it next Wednesday?
Is it Wednesday?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Yes.
ethnic diversity.
Yes, the ethnic diversity one. I think I'm
For
really
people that
encouraged.
can't hear on the, this is an ethnic diversity
Yeah,
group
ethnic diversity group. Yeah.
within
Everyone else-
Reach or within...
Yeah, Reach. Well, it's looking at the mirror for this one, but I'm also working on with the regional teams on the wider.
And where,
Yeah.
how can people find you?
So if they want to email me, it's jana.shah@trinitymirror.com. So I
Jana
You should probably put
Shah.
that out.
Yeah,
You
we'll
should probably put
out.
that on Buzz or on something.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah.
really, really great. So thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's excellent.
So some of the other key questions that we've had, targets, gender gap, gender pay gap. As a manager, I've never been asked how I'm increasing diversity in my team when recruiting and promoting. Is there anything we could do directly for managers that's not just, if the unconscious bias stuff's going to take a while, could there just be a shorter term fix to kind of say to people?
I mean,
Because at the end of the day, our newspaper's obviously trying to serve a population that must be at least 50%
Yeah.
women and made up of...
one of the things I find interesting about
Mm.
Reach, Trinity Mirror, is, and again, I probably shouldn't, just lesson for me is don't take things for granted, but there is a bit of there is an element of common sense, which sometimes I think that
I don't think we can assume that in some
No.
of our
No.
colleagues.
Well, no, and some of the things that I suppose I found slightly concerning is, on a number of fronts, as a manager level sometimes, is that those sort of things you sort of think, and again, I recognise because I'm probably about clearly 109 around this, that most people, so maybe I'm at the point now thinking it's blindingly obvious, and it probably isn't. We are looking, we've redone some of the management training that we've done, some of the early management stuff that we've done, and I think, we probably obviously need to re-emphasise it, along with some other things that I'm also thinking.
Because what about areas like sport? I'm thinking, could there be like an emergency group that kind of looks at some of the areas where clearly women are worse represented? And we've even got women at the World Cup commentating
Yes.
this week.
Yes.
So, you know, other organisations are
and
making
certainly
some
on
progress.
the golf, it was lots of women on the golf where commentating. I noticed at the weekend.
So, like, should any of our areas be just going into special measures? That's what I'm wondering. Until
I
they
mean,
can. Don't know if anyone's here from sport.
I think that the consideration that they have, which is always going to be something, is the opportunities, making sure, I think most importantly, they need to make sure they take the opportunities that arise, when they arise, if they arise, to make sure at that point you're absolutely clear that you need to consider, you know, a diverse population for any roles that come up where you can do it. And I think that really recognising, I think if there was one message that I'd want to get across to everybody is like every vacancy counts, because I think that in an organisation like ours, I think in the past they've always thought that there would be, you know, a fair amount of turnover, and what we do know is with a reducing population, you can't take that for granted. So every role you really, really have to think about it, and that's a message I think that goes out for everybody at the moment, because you can't take it for granted that you're going to have lots of opportunity. There might not be.
So when there's a question there saying what will be done when managers do leave to proactively target recruitment, but do you think does that mean when a manager leaves that's always taken as a job saving?
Well, I mean, I think there's two things that we've done. So one of the things we have done, because I was really, really alarmed about the fact that when I first joined, there was a real consideration that when women went on maternity, when a woman took maternity leave, it was considered to be a cost saving. It was going to be a cost saving because what they didn't want to do, because there is a cost to the department when somebody goes on maternity leave, because you double bubble for a period of time. And now that we've absolutely, so unless someone tells me differently, we've stopped that.
There was a question about maternity leave saying why some women left to organise their own maternity leave. That was one of the questions that came in.
Cannot imagine.
Saying that department by department it's very different, but sometimes it can be a chaotic process that people find it hard to deal with.
Two things around that. So firstly, it should be it's absolutely going to be covered.
Law, surely, isn't
yeah.
it?
What in terms of not covering a maternity leave?
Yeah.
No, I mean you can. I mean depending on business need, do you know what I mean? But actually here, what we've said now is if someone's going on maternity leave, that maternity leave will be covered. So I think that's the first thing. If somebody's struggling sorting their own maternity leave out, please call your HR, because they'll sort it out for you. And one of the things we've also looked at, and we've now got 2 or 3 people trained, is on kangaroo coaching, which is opportunities to help women and managers where part of their team is going on maternity leave. So we are taking some proactive steps to help people go on maternity and manage it. And certainly in my own team, Francesca's off, and we're going to get her coached as well, so she makes sure I'm doing everything right, and she's going off in good grace. So I think that's all the rest of it. And again, what I would genuinely say to you, and I'd say to everybody, and I read some of the questions on that the network put together, and there were some questions around pay and feeling that some people feeling their salaries were inequitable with other colleagues. If there's something around maternity leave, if there's something around that, I think firstly I would encourage you absolutely have to talk to your line manager. If you don't get anywhere with that, then you need to speak to your HR in your first instance, or escalate that further in terms of HR to your head of HR. And I think that we really do need to, if you are being concerned, I'd far rather us try and tackle that as opposed to have a whole load of anonymous comments in a paper.
So if you know that you're not being paid as much as somebody else,
or you think you aren't being paid, because I think that there's quite a lot of one of the things that I think often happens in these situations is that there can be quite a lot of either misunderstanding, or there is other considerations, because bluntly speaking, salaries are arrived at, through salaries will increase with the length of time somebody has been in a role. And
but we've kind of seen this at the BBC, haven't we, that people would say, well, the American correspondent's been there such a long time and the one for China hasn't. So obviously organisations are facing this, and yet there is still a feeling that actually whichever bureau you're the head of should be a kind of equal
I agree with that. I think that there is also a reality to the fact that in an organisation like ours, you will have arrived at a situation where individuals for a period of time, if they've been here 20 plus years, interesting, they'll also have been here at the heyday of our business.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you will also have seen their salaries being impacted by market forces at those particular times.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's been an attempt to clear out a lot of those
and whilst
people.
we have, whilst the other things we will see around that is around, making sure that we, again, I think in the past we've just accepted that was just the way it is. Now, there are things you can do. You can hang on to people, you can red circle salaries and you can adjust them. We haven't taken some of those practices, which I do believe we should do. But in the same way that you were saying I can't take things for granted and I need to educate our management population, the senior management population, on how you manage some of those situations through in a professional way that doesn't penalise people and actually gives us an opportunity to make sure that, that those things, and I don't want you to go away thinking that's a massive issue. It isn't. There might be one or two things.
Yeah, because lots of people in those circumstances as well would go and talk to their union, wouldn't they? Which traditionally hasn't had a very good relationship with the company.
Well, interestingly, I might be sitting here being really, really naive. I've worked in organisations where the relationship with the unions has been a hell of a lot worse, put it that way. And actually, I think that one of the things that I've been really encouraged by is actually the unions, for the most part here, are pretty good. And I think that, and one of the things that we're also really conscious of, that's probably less so with maybe, I'm not quite sure how it sits with the Express, but our early indications might not be that's not quite the case. We want to make sure we continue with that. But I think probably the point, if you look at a lot of the population, I'm not saying people aren't members of the union at more senior levels, but sometimes the point where people get really concerned about the salary, maybe not always in terms of union representation. And I genuinely say, look, first point of call has to be your manager. Your manager has to be able to justify what you're being paid. If you don't get a satisfactory answer, then you need to come to HR, and then we will sit down with you and your manager to make sure that we're looking at it effectively.
And what about, there was a question just up there about the sort of tap on the shoulder, that old culture that kind of goes back to, maybe there's groups of men in the office that kind of drink together and...
So I think that, I think there's a couple of things there, is the fact...
Do women need to go out drinking together more?
No.
Yeah.
Let's hope not. I think we can do better than that. I think that there's two things around that. I think that there's an inclination to think that there's that tapping on the shoulder. Then there is a reality to the fact, as I've said, if you're restructuring and you're restructuring in an environment where you are looking at senior men, rightly, they have legal right to be considered for a role. It's really hard to it can be quite difficult to introduce somebody else from the outset. Now, that doesn't mean you're tapping on the shoulder. It means you are following a legitimate process. However, one of the things that me doing my very boring job role framework, which isn't very exciting to anyone other than an HR person, one of the things that is allowing me to do, and everybody, all of the senior managers in the organisation, we've just been looking at a talent review. And what we are able to tell now is by level in the organisation where the sort of top talent is, be that men and women. And we've got 2 new programmes coming out, one for managers and one for Springboard Talent. And what we will be doing is actually, if we're making sure that actually means that we can be probably slightly more proactive in terms of looking at who should be, could be coming up.
And is there a time frame for this process?
Yep. So that it finally concludes at the end of this month.
Okay.
And then the 2 new programmes go into recruitment. They go through selection mode, ready to start at the beginning of September. And
so from September we should start to see tangible
we'll see
change.
2 things actually. We'll see. So it's not women only.
I'm
talent
just wondering
programmes.
when to come back to you.
No. You can come back to me anytime you like. There are 2 programmes. There'll be men and women together. And I think rightly so, because I think that, I think it's useful for everyone to be working in those mixed groups, and I think it works very effectively. We've also we've experimented with some individual women going on women-only leadership courses outside. So Reuters, interestingly, do a course that we've used our previous sort of connections there. They do a women only one. They gave us a free place on one of their women in leadership external programs. We've done that. It sort of was considered for the person that went on it, wasn't probably quite the right level, but we'll have a look at that, because I do think that women have some special considerations around confidence. I think you mentioned it at the start, and I think there's some things that, and some modules and the ways that we can look at that. But we're just exploring the right opportunities. We thought Reuters might give us a good opportunity. It might be. I think we just got the level of person going on it wrong the first time round.
And I'm conscious we haven't talked about sexual harassment, which I know when you talk about those mixed groups might be more of an issue. One of the reasons women quite like to have a separate group is so that some of those issues can get discussed, which in the past were never ever. I mean, in some ways, the fact that people are even discussing them seems quite a breakthrough, because they certainly weren't in my early days at the Mirror. Is what can be done in those sort of situations? Because one of the questions I had that was really specific basically said, we've seen people being promoted out of after sexually harassing somebody. So if things like that are going on in the company,
really,
how could people?
I don't know. I mean, that's hard for me to comment on specific. What I would say to you, and it's always really quite difficult in the sense that I'm probably relying on those people who have seen me in close action to maybe verify this in terms of very genuinely. My team would say this, and hopefully the ones individuals I've worked with, and Alison particularly as well, will know that I've done more investigations in this company in the last 18 months, and we have seen more addressing of the issues than I think we've ever seen before. Now, part of the consideration is whenever you do those investigations, that obviously for everyone concerned, even the women maybe raising it, you have to keep it very confidential. So I can hardly go, hey, guess what? I did this and this and this. I can't do that. But I think that what I would hope is happening, and I do think is, the fact is that I think more women are prepared to talk to me. And
should they come straight to HR if they're facing that kind of issue? If they feel
the first thing they should do, and we've got to get managers in this place have to manage. So, I mean, the first port of call has to be your line manager. And if you don't get a satisfactory answer there, then it's HR. And that has to be the way we deal with this. I'm not a big fan of the anonymous, things, because it absolutely ties my hands behind me, but I can't really do anything around it. So you are going to have to be brave about it, and if somebody's concerned about it, they are going to need to come and talk to us. They can come and talk to us confidentially in the first instance, but equally if they want me to do something about it, they have to be prepared to let me work through it. And those of you, there are individuals in the company that have seen that operating, and I hope that if they could reassure people that we would deal with it sensibly, and we have, honestly, I've done more than I think we've seen before.
Are there any questions from the floor?
It's not personally with me, but I've seen quite a few pop up about parents. Like women saying that do parents not get promoted because they've got children and don't have flexibility?
Yeah, do parents not get promoted because they don't have flexibility, and maybe they don't want to work those? There was a culture in the Mirror for a while of terrible presenteeism where everybody had to be in the office for 15 hours, and how do we change that culture? Because also it's not necessarily the most efficient.
Thank you for raising that. I can't see that. In fact, I'm actually struggling to sit on this seat. This seat should be, this is non-diverse, can I tell you? Sitting with the skirt on is probably the worst thing that there is in existence, actually, around doing this. In terms of that one, interestingly, we've done some research, and there's some really interesting stuff that's coming out of it, which might be, I don't know whether it's women not putting themselves forward or whether we're not doing it. So what I can see from the analysis at the minute is men do double the amount of overtime than women. So there is going to be something which means that you are going to see the men around an awful lot more. The other thing is we're seeing that women are taking more unpaid leave than men, quite considerably, and more sick absence. And one of the things we're seeing around that, one of the things that may be around that is that they might be taking sick absence for children because children are poorly or family members might be poorly as well as for themselves. And I need to understand what's going on in that space. You know, I need to understand what's going on in that space.
Because women are increasingly also caring for the older
Yes,
generation, aren't they,
exactly.
as
So
well
it's
as
not,
children.
yeah. So it's
you've got
not. So
double-
we need to actually have a look at what's going on there, and to see whether now, you know, I recognise. I would like to be able to sit here. I'd like to hear hand on heart and say, of course we're not promoting men over women that have got children because they can't do that. I think I need to understand what's causing that. If there is I really need to see if that is a problem and what we can do about it.
But because culturally there's also an issue that if a child is sick, this goes across obviously the whole country, the woman stays at home, the man goes to work. That would be like a general decision in the household.
Yeah.
But so men at Trinity Mirror obviously have to feel that they're able to say, my child's sick today and can't come to school and I need to be at home, which would also be a way of sort of levelling.
Yes,
if
and
they
again, I
feel
think back
that
to one of your
cultural
first
shift.
questions, which is around that parental leave thing. Do you know what I mean? Men understanding that and feeling that they can.
Because when
they can
parental
do
leave
it.
was first introduced, I can remember it was absolutely hilarious, and there was no man in the office who would have actually
Yeah.
taken it. I
Yeah.
can remember the first person taking it, and then
Yeah.
I'm trying
think
not to say take the piss out of, but that,
What I
that
would
was kind of
genuinely
what
say
happened.
is
that the culture shifts.
Yeah, and interestingly, what we would see is that I think I'm never very good at the labels they give them, but the millennials or anything else, that we are seeing with the younger populations coming through, their view on work-life balance, men and women, is very, very, very different to my generation. And I think that's very positive because they will push us and charge us in terms of doing a number of things. One very positive thing I wanted to say about Nationals, I think Nationals got clobbered quite a bit, but they're very good at flexible working. Well, very good. They're better than much better than some of the areas in looking at flexible working. And I think it's one of the things you have done very well. Are we brilliant at it? No, we're not. But I think that we're looking at it, and certainly even in my own function, we've been, you know, I recognise I have to lead by example, if you like. We've been looking at some very different models for some more senior roles in terms of them being on a part-time basis, and them, you know, operating quite differently to where before. So a bit more room further to go in those areas. And interestingly, I do think that one of the things we're missing at the minute is, from a cost-saving perspective, actually getting a role done effectively on a part-time basis can be a good approach, and actually can fit in that. What we do need to be careful of, though, is that we don't want to give somebody a full-time job and expect them to do it part-time hours. I mean, I think we need to be really careful
that is
around how to
normally
do
what
that.
happens.
Yeah, I know, because there's a real danger in that. I'm not naive to that, but I think that that's one of the things that I think can be very interesting for men and women.
So will you be talking to parents in the company to try and work out what the...
Yeah.
so more research coming in that?
Yes, I mean, I think that, as I said, we've got a number of indicators that, and the other thing I think, interesting, we probably ought to say, we now are monitoring engagement for men and women very regularly, and women answer the survey, the PCON survey. On average, 7% more women answer the survey than men, and they are 0.3% consistently more engaged than the men in the company. So there's a really interesting thing. So it's quite an interesting stat in terms of that, and we are monitoring it, and we're introducing some more questions in that front to keep on top of it. So I think there's some good things, and hopefully this type of forum, etc., is going to make that even more positive.
Can I just ask one thing that comes over to me? I know your point about some of the companies like The Guardian and Virgin and Sky have put out their plan of what they're going to do to reduce the gender pay gap. And I know Simon's very much wants to make sure that it's achievable and that it's sensible and all the rest of it. But when do you think we might see it?
What, his plan?
Yeah.
So, in all fairness to him, do you know what I mean? We've done the research. We've monitored. What I had agreed with him was that we would do 2 quarters worth of my analysis in terms of levers, starters, what we were doing. We're just looking at the trajectory in terms of, like, okay, so if we did absolutely nothing, where would we end up with the turnover and the restructuring type of stuff we've got at the minute? What are the sort of things, where could we make a difference in terms of what are we looking at that? I have to say to you, I would be clear in terms of managing expectations around it. And I'm with him on this, in that what he will say is that he will always go for the best talent for the job, and that he will make sure that he's very likely to make sure that every opportunity is given to make sure that we have equal slates, and we are doing everything we can to make sure that we are considering every woman that is available within our organisation, or those opportunities to do it. But the ultimate statement will be, not least because we think, we've got other areas of diversity to consider as well, we will go for the best candidate for the job. That has to be our overriding comment. What is important, though, is we make sure that there's probably more women that are going to be strong candidates in those situations and ultimately successful than we've done in the past.
So I think, when is the unconscious bias training happening? Has just popped up, which I suppose is part of that.
So there's two things I think probably, as I said, my aim would be that, as I said, something online. As I said, probably I would imagine we've just got the LMS, we've just got our facility to be able to do some of this training effectively for a regionally diverse population. So I believe that's
would it be compulsory for people?
Yeah, no, it will be. It needs to be. it needs to be compulsory. So we're getting a raft of things that are compulsory for managers.
Mm-hmm.
That goes into it, along with the, I'm sure the.
Because traditionally people weren't really trained as managers at all, were they?
No.
In our company it was just like,
problem.
oh, you're now a manager.
no.
So these
Actually, your
marketing
skills
to
were.
the managers, will that be out this year then?
Well, no, it's already.
All
We've already started,
Right,
so
okay.
I'm sure you've logged on to the LMS. But the LMS is there now, and it's got the interestingly one of the things the first.
What's the LMS?
So learning management system, which is accessed through your HR. It's on your own dashboard. You go in there, you go into your learning and development bit there, and there's a number of things there. Firstly, there's the compulsory and mandatory training, which will include anti-bribery, will include GDPR, will include, as I said, ultimately for managers would be can be the unconscious bias training around that in the first instance. And I think, and what some of those stuff we'll probably recycle through every couple of years if you're a manager to have to do it. But
How will you know if someone's done it?
Because actually now, as
I'm
Lloyd
not saying I'm mistrustful.
Well, Lloyd will tell you. We had an interesting thing at SET this week, in the sense that last week rather, where I was monitoring which of the senior team had done their GDPR training, and who'd gone into the system to look at it, and was resorted to bribery in terms of lobbing out chocolate bars in terms of who'd done it. It had an amazing effect. In fact, Vijay was the one that, interestingly, he'd started it but hadn't shown he'd finished it. So I can track actually now if anyone's even been on the system, in the system, completed it and everything else. It's the first time we'll have got absolute clarity in terms of who's done everything. And all credit to Kirsty and team who set that up, because it's going to be one of the real ways that we can demonstrate we're getting traction.
And just doing like an online thing, it's not going to completely change your...
No, I think
mind,
that
is it?
for some of the senior teams, so for example, there are various things that my view would be, we haven't scheduled yet, if you ask me, we should do something much more physical for the set and maybe the next levels down. The reason for saying it's online is, we've got, 5,500 people, and of those, a high chunk of managers. Physically getting to all of them would be extremely costly and probably not most effective. So if I can have something online, it is going to make, at least I've got something there.
Mhm.
And I think for specific groups, we'll do something quite different. Sorry.
So will the unconscious bias training be compulsory just for managers or for all our colleagues?
I think in the first instance it would be managers, because I think they're the ones that you are going to look at it. But interesting, there's no reason why online training couldn't become a mandatory field for everyone to do that. But as I said, I think that there's almost a priority picking, let's get that population who perhaps are more directly influencing things sorted out first. But there's no reason why it couldn't go broader than that.
Lloyd?
Well, just a couple of things, if possible. There's been a few questions about, up on the board there, about pace of change and how quickly things are or aren't actually happening. And I'd just point to a couple of things. There was what's happened since the network started. Well, we've got a new editor of the Daily Mirror. She's a woman. And she didn't get it because she is a woman. because she got it because she's brilliant, but that's a good thing and that will help. The benchmarking that we've introduced in salary reviews has made a significant difference. And I can think of a number of examples. I won't give anyone else will know as well. Some of the restructure we've done where, if we're honest, in the past, somebody on salary X.
Do you think people can't, because there's people tuning into the live broadcast, do you want to have a bit of mic? Do you want to borrow my seat for a sec?
You just want to get off that
Go
stool,
on, I
don't
do,
you?
yeah. Stretch
It's
my
not
leg.
really going to be that interesting. But
And you're even worse than I am.
sorry, yeah, I'm ancient. Right, so I said that first bit
Yeah,
again
yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's happened since the network started? We have a new editor of the Daily Mirror, and Alison is obviously in that role, and she's got that job not because she is a woman, but she's got the job because she's absolutely brilliant and the best person for it. But I think that will very much help, certainly in editorial. Benchmarking. Benchmarking in terms of new roles, promotions, restructures, etc. That is not something we ever used to do in the past, and I'm really glad that we do now, and thank you very much for that, Julia. There have been, I can think of a number, and Alison would confirm this, number of moves that we've done recently, and promotions, particularly of women, where, if we're honest, in the past, we would have looked at their salary, and we would have said, we could get away with giving them 5k. Not because they're a woman or a man, just because they're probably, that's the salary that they're, you know, either way, we would have done that. Benchmarking has had some significant improvements there. So that really, you know, definitely is making a difference. And the other thing I was going to mention was, in National's editorial, we did circulate an email recently which says, commitment to diversity and equality within our company. One way of taking this forward, from now on, we would like all interview shortlists within National's editorial to have a 50-50 gender balance. So that is something we have proactively introduced. We've said, of course, if it is not possible, then just to highlight that, and we'll make a note of it, and we'll track it, and Eleanor will track that, and see whether there are particular areas. You mentioned sport. We've wanted a female football writer for print for about 5 or 6, 7 years. But one of the problems, apart from...
No. I mean, I was on sport for on and off-ish for a while, but they've hired one reporter in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
This is the point.
Yeah.
This is the point.
And the point I was
So,
making
so
about
with a lack of churn, so where there are opportunities are digital, and that's I think where we are doing better in print, because we are ultimately actually not seeing people move out of their jobs. So we're not looking to, unfortunately, recruit very often. It is very difficult to turn it around, and you're exactly right. I think there's been one, and he was a bloke, but he was black. So thank God we did something right. But
But that's maybe where we need the quota. If you're only going to get one job every 15 years, maybe we have to say that has to be a woman.
yeah, and we
some
should
of
probably
Or
get
black person,
HR involved
or just somebody.
and start actually thinking, identifying women that we could, because we haven't actually had any female sports writers apply to us either,
So
apart from
what-
Anne.
So I think there's a couple of things we can do
Okay,
there.
go away.
There's a couple of things that we should and can do. So we have, I would say that it probably has fallen slightly down our priority list, because if you can imagine, because we haven't had that many, we know when we've been shrinking, it doesn't quite hit the priority list. But there are now, I am aware of 2 university areas which have got a couple of university areas which have got specific courses, journalistic courses that are promoting women in sport, for example. And I think that even if we can't take somebody into a vacancy, we should be offering internships, we should be offering opportunity to see these women. And again, I got some contacts, we just haven't quite got there yet, but there are some things that we absolutely can do in those areas that I think that just means that people are aware of what we do and we can see some other good women.
So I'm conscious it's 11 o'clock, I can see on your wrist, and everyone's got to get the paper out. When shall we come back to you and have this again to unveil the
So interestingly,
results?
yeah. So So I saw one question up there, which is what it says. So Simon, in the next few weeks, will publish what we're looking to do and the actions we've got. I'm very keen that we have some things that are measurable, so we can look back and say that in a year's time. So I do think that what I've seen for the first 2 quarters this year is that we are going to need a year because of all the reasons we've discussed this morning. I think that we know that it's probably is going to be tough. And
Is that a year from now or a year from...
well, interesting, the publication is probably, there's a date in April where, the other thing you know about the gender pay gap is that we have to calculate it on the same day every year. So it's about April time. So I would have said first quarter next year is a good time to come back. And I think we'll have got a number of things there where I feel more comfortable about it. In the meantime,
yeah,
I
could you
don't
give us
need
an
to sit-
interim report
yeah,
maybe
I mean,
in 6
it's
months or
yeah.
something?
I'm really, I'm very happy to come and talk to teams or, I wasn't looking forward to being sat on a stool being interviewed today, but actually you've made it very Pennies, thank you. But I think that I'm very happy to do this again. I'm very happy to do everything else, or otherwise simply if individuals have issues, just come and talk to me or my team. So.
But I think, I mean, you're inheriting a build-up of frustration that's been going on for decades. I think so I think obviously people now that the cat's kind of out of the bag on all of this, people feel very impatient and just think, right, we want this to be sorted out. It's 2018. So I think
Absolutely.
you'll definitely have people that will want to help you and also keep pushing you along. But
That's fine.
thank you very much
My pleasure.
for doing this
Thank you.
today.